Welcome to another episode of the Masculinity Uncovered podcast, where men's mental health matters. I am your host, Danielle N. Henry, and I have another special guest. When I say he's very special, I've been knowing this man since I was 18 years old, right before I went to college. And I'm really excited that he traveled down here to speak to us about what masculinity means to him and being a man in his shoes. So let me welcome you guys to Wellington Harris.
Hello.
Hey,
how you doing?
How's it going?
I'm good.
Do you remember when we first met?
Yeah, I do remember we first met through mutual friends. Yes.
You remember?
Got to know Dirty Red.
Okay, everybody don't know Dirty Red.
Yeah,
So, know.
I know. I had to put that out there.
I see. You just put it all out there. Right?
We're gonna start as raw as we can today. We're gonna start as raw as we can.
Brandy from the softball circuit.
Yes, Brandy and Wally. Yep.
Yep, Brandy and Wally. And let me just say, the Intimidators was the team.
Oh, good gracious.
And Jim, I had to give a shout out. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I had to give a shout out.
You're still doing it.
Because to be able to play on a team where it was phenomenal to be with a group of girls that we rocked and gelled together and played with passion.
Understandable.
We're talking about softball.
You know, that's one of my loves. So
Absolutely. So we connected. I remember going over to Brandy's house, and it's just like, Dirty Red, I got a friend that I want you to meet, and his name is Wellington, and I think you're gonna like him. And I was like. You know, I was only black on the team, so I just didn't know what to expect. You know what I'm saying? So, and I don't do parties, that often.
Right.
But I went over and, I think it was late coming because I was getting ready to leave, I believe.
Yes, that's right.
And the connection that we had was music.
Right.
You remember that?
Absolutely.
Because I didn't know what to expect. Because you were friends with Wally, right?
Yeah, that's great.
And Brandy were, they were talking at the time. And we connected, on the music tip.
Yep, we sure did.
And from there, it just stemmed because I was actually getting ready to go off to college. All right? And so when you're friends with somebody for that long of a period, just think of everything that we've been through.
True.
Like, where are you originally from, Wellington?
I was born in Colorado, and I grew up in California.
Okay.
So, ended up in Washington, D.C. at Howard University.
Okay.
And then from there, settled in Knoxville, Tennessee. Spent some time in Atlanta as well.
Yeah, that's right.
But I'm back in Tennessee currently.
Right. You said come full circle.
Come full circle.
It comes full circle.
Right.
We have had so many conversations throughout the year, like raw conversations.
About a little bit of everything.
Everything.
Right.
Everything. And so that's why I'm really excited to have you here.
Okay.
Because there's no limit. There's no limit
to
what we talk about.
True.
And I think that, breaking down masculinity, you have really taught me a lot of what being in the mind of a man. You have been that inspiration to me.
Okay. That's interesting. That's interesting. Okay.
I'm letting you know this right now.
Okay.
So can you tell me what masculinity means to you and being a man in the life of your shoes?
Masculinity just comes with the responsibility for the people around you and being mindful of your sphere and the people that you touch and the people that you take care of and protect and lead, whether it's your significant other or wife or your children, even with your coworkers and extended family. I think what it comes down to is just being the very best that you can be for others. It's really more an act of service than it is serving yourself and your own needs. I think that too often people get it twisted and think that being masculine means that you are somehow hungry for power or you're hungry for some type of status. But really it's just about serving the people around you to make sure everyone's good. At least that's how I kind of move. I mean, and I think in doing that and in being of service to others, you garner power from different people in different areas through your actions and through your examples. And then, for me, I have a son now, and for me, the most important thing is raising another man.
Yeah.
It's just the most incredible thing and the most profoundly masculine thing that you have an opportunity to do. And I think sometimes as men, we miss out on that. We miss out on that opportunity and don't recognize the gift that is.
Yeah.
To actually create another man and to guide another man into his masculine energy and his manhood.
But prior to you having your son,
Mm-hmm.
you also was a father figure to many.
True.
You know
true.
what I'm saying?
True.
So who were some of your inspirations that, helped shape the way you think about masculinity today?
My inspirations. I've had men in my life, whether it was my father, who was very instrumental in my life for many years. My stepfather now, who's been very instrumental as well. And then I have just friends. I think that, there was a period of time in my life where I was kind of separated from father figures in the sense that I wasn't in the best place with my own father. I wasn't in an environment where I was actually able to gain perspective from people who would traditionally be my father figure. So I had to kind of glean information from different places and different individuals.
Yeah.
Whether it was professors, whether it was coworkers, whether it was just the friends that I've had the pleasure of making and growing with as I've grown into a man. So at the core, though, it's my dad. No matter how rocky our relationship has ever been or things that we've gone through, he's the core of who I am.
Yeah, yeah.
Good, bad, and ugly.
That's right.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And really now, being a father, the things that may have been those ugly parts or the not so positive things.
So talk about a few of those things, just so we have an idea of what you're talking about when you.
Okay, so when I say things like that, my father was an alcoholic or is an alcoholic. There are things or there are ways that he went about raising me that I've realized that I've had to tweak and adjust in order to raise my son differently. And I think we all go through that. You always kind of go through, I'll never put my child through that, or I'll never teach my children these things or treat them these ways. But then you realize that some of the things that your parents have done for you were for a reason.
Yeah.
One thing about my father was that his methods were extreme, but his motives were right on point. So,
give me an example.
My dad was very physical.
Okay.
I grew up in a time where, the physical or corporal punishment, if you will, was, I won't say accepted, but it was just kind of part of child rearing at the time.
Yeah.
So for me, being raised by someone who was kind of raised in a more harsh environment, even by his father.
Right.
It's a generational thing.
Yeah.
But then what you realize is that sometimes in generational, through generational situations, you have to, break some of those things or modify some of those things or do things slightly different because of the times, because of the good that comes from certain things and some of the negatives that you get from those things.
Right.
We're all out here. There's no playbook, so we're all out here just trying to figure it out.
Yeah.
We're all out here just trying to do what feels the best for us. Like I tell my son all the time, I'm proud of you, but I want you to do what's going to make you proud. If you do things that make you proud, 9 times out of 10, you're on the right path.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to do things that will make me proud about how I'm raising him and exemplifying those things to him.
Yeah.
The same way my father did with me, but in those moments when I want to just go crazy and blow up and be angry and snatch him up, I have to stop myself and realize, okay, there's another way I can go about this that's not going to kill his fire.
That part.
That's not going to mute who he is, and it's going to give him a chance to settle in who he is and grow that. Maybe even if it's just redirecting anger that he has.
Yeah.
Letting him know that, yeah, that was a mistake, and I'm disappointed that you made that mistake, but we can fix this.
Right.
Like, let's make this right.
Yeah.
It's become more prudent to me and more acceptable in the way that I move with him to not use my anger or exhibit my anger in a physical way, rather than express to him, look, I'm disappointed. These are things I need you to do. These are things I want for you to fix and to look at, so on and so forth. And even at 7 years old, he understands that.
Oh, absolutely.
He grasps that.
Yeah.
And it's almost this idea that he appreciates, you can tell that he appreciates the fact that I didn't go crazy, I didn't blow up, and that we could talk through it, and that, okay, Daddy understands.
Yeah.
I was watching something where I think it was Malcolm Jamal Warner said something about to love or to raise a black boy, or the best way to raise a black boy is to love him so completely, so thoroughly, so intensely that he's more worried about disappointing you than making the mistake.
Yeah.
And with my son, I can whoop his tail over the phone. You know what I'm saying?
I do.
I can let him know that I'm disappointed. He can feel my disappointment in a way that it's like, wow, I gotta make this right, Daddy. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
And for right now, it works. We'll see what the teenage years brings. But I'm trying to set a precedent now that I can, we can kind of lean on and go back to, so that I'm not fighting with him and we're not going, having a fisticuffs type situation.
Yeah.
So.
I'm glad that we're talking about this, because we've talked about this in the past as far as like generational.
Mm-hmm.
And it is a lot of times generational, but it does bring trauma. And we don't talk about those traumas because of circumstances,
Right.
you know what I'm saying, in the family. And, black family, just to be specific about our culture and how we were raised.
Mm-hmm.
And we suppress a lot of things.
True.
And we do the best that we can. But it's interesting that as we get older and we try to shift and make those changes, that it's frowned upon if we don't, spank our children or hit our children, and we're actually trying to do it a different therapeutic way.
Right.
And correction, which should be the way, right?
Right.
And it's kind of contradictory when we say no one should be putting their hands on you or should be abusing you, but then if you go and you're doing that,
right.
or if you're, using verbal abuse or what have you, but you're teaching them, what respect is. So, it's interesting.
I agree. I also believe that if we are using physical abuse to correct our children, how can we readily have or take issue with police officers using physical abuse to correct our children?
That is interesting. Yeah.
And I think that all too often we've used physical abuse to reprimand our children, to raise our children, and then when they get out in the street and police officers or authorities use that same technique, it's almost accepted. They almost are like, okay, this is kind of my penance for doing what I did. And then somehow it gets swept under the rug because it's been swept under the rug their whole life.
Yeah.
So I would much rather, now don't get me wrong, in those moments when corporal punishment and a butt whooping is called on, there are times when we have to go there. But the older he gets and the more he understands what the expectations are, the less that's even an issue.
I agree. But I also, we do have to think about every children is different. And they receive different things. Because even with my daughter, whipping and all of that, whooping her, spanking her, that did nothing.
Right.
But sitting her down, because she's very active, I had to learn, I had to do something totally different. But be able to sit her down to make her be quiet for 5 minutes.
True.
That was hard for her to do.
Because she loves to talk.
From sun up to sundown.
Right.
I mean, when she came out, that's all it was. She was still in my stomach, but then when she came out, I was like, oh, she's here. But that's the thing, just to be able to think about what we're doing, and it's custom. You know, if you think about it and how we deal with people, and that's why I think it's interesting to talk and hear people's perspective on masculinity, because not everybody thinks, you know, the same about that, even from man to man.
True.
Just to be honest with you.
Very true.
And I believe that it's the experiences that we experience that shape that.
Well, yeah, I think you're absolutely right. And I think that the fact that the point that you made about children being different and having a different approach and having to know that child and how they process just everything. You know, my son in particular is very abstract or very analytical. He's very literal. If I tell him we're going to be someplace at such and such time, if we aren't there at that time, he's going to call me out on it.
Yeah.
If we say that we're going to eat a certain thing and the plans change, he's like, wait, that's not what we agreed upon. So once I've recognized that he's as literally as he is, that I have had to make very distinct decisions or very distinct approach to be a man of my word and do what I say I'm going to do.
That's right.
And if I'm not going to, I need to let him know with enough time to let him process it and get an understanding that, hey, we got to make a shift.
Yeah.
And I need you to know we're making this shift. And I'm not making this shift to slight you. I'm making this shift for these reasons. And if we can come back around and get to what you need or what you're wanting, we will. But trust and believe I got your best interest at heart. And once I realized that him being frustrated or him acting out really was on me, then I had to go ahead and, you know, really look at myself and say, okay, I can fix this problem.
Right.
I can't be mad at him because I'm not willing to fix the problem. So I had to fix the problem. So I think it's just a learning curve. And we all go through that with all of our children.
Yeah.
No matter what their approach to life is, we all kind of have to figure out what the best way to relate to them is.
Yeah.
So I agree with you. With them all being different and having a different approach to life, you have to approach them differently.
Yeah, but I do believe that it comes with maturity too, and being able to self-reflect. Like you said, there's a lot of people, a lot of parents that they're still trying to get it. Well, we all trying to get it together.
True.
Let me
That
say
never
that.
is. That never is.
Right.
That's all I'm doing. Right.
We're all trying to be better. But there's also sometimes where parents, sometimes they take offense to their children trying to correct them. In a sense, like they look at that as correction, like, you know, how we were, you know, were raised, or how we grew up is that children are to be seen and not heard. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So, but for us to be able to shift, you know, our age group and to look at that, you know, and how we were raised, to be able to take some things from our parents, because they didn't all get it wrong, you know?
True.
There's things that I say that we like, you know, we have those conversations, and there's, as we get to be parents and you know, grown adults, that I think it's healthy to talk to our parents about what we experienced as a child. And sometimes the parents think that they were doing it all right.
Well, yeah, I think that they have to. I think that one thing I've learned, especially with my mother, is that she was doing the best that she could because there were things about her relationship with my father that were already overwhelming. Right. So then having a child or having children in tandem with that was just a lot. So she did the best she could with the circumstances that were given to her.
Yeah.
But I also realized too, in talking to parents, and I know, because I know Nan, I know your mother, that son-in-law. Parents tend, I know that parents tend to, how can I say this? Feign forgetfulness because of shame, because of realizing that, you know what, maybe I didn't handle that the best I could have then. Maybe I didn't have the self-reflection that you're talking about at that time. Maybe I didn't have the resources that I have now, that I would have done things differently. Because nobody wants to be told that they were wrong or that they made a mistake or that they dropped the ball or anything like that. So sometimes that can be a difficult conversation to have with my mother, even to say, hey, you know, this is what was going on, especially as we become adults and have children of our own, and you start to realize, wait a minute, that shouldn't have played out that way.
Right.
Like, I know as a parent that it's possible it could have played out this way.
Yeah.
And you have to give, what I've learned is you have to give your parents grace.
Yes.
And give them grace that they were just doing the best they could with the set of tools that they were given.
Absolutely.
And then hope that one day, once your children have children, that they'll give you the same grace as well in those areas that you feel like, man, I messed that up. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So it's just kind of it's a cyclical kind of thing that we all end up having to go through. And it's kind of like, if you want that grace from your child, you probably need to sit back and allow your parents the same grace.
Absolutely.
You know?
Absolutely. And I think it's also interesting that as adults, when we do have those conversations, that sometimes it's not really received, you know, and some of them are in denial about some things.
Right.
And because sometimes it's hard to have the conversation, first of all. But when you get the courage to have them, and then it's not received,
right?
Then it makes you feel some type of way inside.
True.
But then you also have to decide, as families, how you're going to distance yourself from that. Because sometimes you got to think about your mental health.
Some conversations are not worth the stress that comes from it. Right.
Absolutely.
Like, your peace ends up being a whole lot more valuable to you.
Yeah.
And I think part of giving the grace is that maybe your parents think that their peace is more valuable to them. So rather than
that's true.
get into it, they're just like, let's just not talk about it. Let's just sweep it under the rug.
Right.
You're fine. You turned out okay. You can't be that upset with me. Everything's okay. Concentrate on your children. Because in order to open up a wound that is probably, for all intents and purposes, healed, or at least healed to the naked eye.
Right.
In order to open up that kind of wound, you got to take a scalpel to it and actually cut it open.
Yeah, that's
and
true.
then you got to go through the whole process of, bleeding out the issue again.
And then just to say, to also add to that, triggers.
True.
That's where triggers come from.
Oh,
because
my goodness.
Even with my biological father, you know, I've learned that, follow through is very important.
Right.
And he doesn't have a lot of that.
Right.
And so that, when I look at other men and they don't, that's a trigger for me. When they don't do what they say they're going to do, I'm going to back all the way up.
Right.
So it's a trigger for me. But being able to identify where those triggers come from.
True.
Because it comes from somewhere,
Right.
And so we have to look deeper and to say, why am I being triggered by something? Not necessarily that, like if you're dealing with a person at the time, but they could say something or do something that is, make you feel triggered because of something that's happened maybe in your childhood from a parent or something.
Well, I'll say this, triggers are, I believe, are real, but I also believe that a trigger means that it's attached to a gun. And if the gun is your gun,
you gotta deal with it.
Then not only do you have to deal with it, but you have the power over whether the safety is on or not.
Oh, that's good.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
I think too often we lean on the idea that, well, I have triggers. Well, it's your gun.
Right. What you gonna do with it?
So, in this culture of, people being able to have firearms and so on and so forth, right?
Yeah.
If it's your gun, you can't blame somebody else for you pulling that trigger or for that trigger being pulled.
Yeah.
You have the safety on or you don't.
Right.
And if the trigger was able to be pulled, it's because you didn't have the safety on, not because they pulled the trigger.
That's right.
You know what I'm saying? I think that we have to take accountability a lot of times for how we react, how those things are, or how those things become triggers.
True.
And if we take accountability for those things and we're walking around with our gun in our pocket or with our gun out for people to see, and it's a lot easier to move around when the safety's on.
Yeah.
You feel safer when the safety's on.
Yeah.
I think you're only worried about your triggers being pulled when you don't have a safety on your gun, and you're walking around in situations, this gun could go off at any minute, and you're kind of apprehensive.
Right.
But when a person's got the safety on their gun,
Yeah.
they're not worried about anything. They know they have their gun if they need it.
Absolutely.
But they know that it's protected and they're protected from it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I think what it turns into is an opportunity to be accountable.
I like that.
And I think, unfortunately, too often now in relationships, in our own health, in our own dealings with other people, people are so afraid to take accountabilities for their action and the things that they can control.
Yeah.
And then they want to place it on other people.
Right.
One of the things I know with my mother, I sound like my father. So just audibly.
Yeah.
And if I raise my voice out of excitement or passion or anything like that,
Yeah.
she's told me that's a trigger.
Right.
So I may not have any intention of any ill will or harm towards her, but if that's something that triggers her, to me, her safety isn't on.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because if her safety was on, she'd feel safe with me, no
Right.
matter how I move,
Yeah.
and especially knowing who I come from.
Right. That's right.
So it's an accountability thing,
Yeah.
and we've had that conversation, my mother and I.
Yeah.
And I've told her directly, hey, I hear this is a trigger, but this isn't my issue. This is something that I need you to deal with so that we can deal with each other better.
Absolutely.
And she understood wholeheartedly, and she was like, I'm glad we had this conversation.
That's good.
So, having the awareness, like you said, of oneself and of those around you, enough to give grace, to allow yourself and for them to feel safe,
Yeah.
makes it a lot easier for accountability and
Right.
things like that.
Absolutely. So I know time is getting away from us a little
Yeah,
bit.
it always does. It always does.
It always does. We can talk for hours and hours and hours on all kinds of different
I'll come back if I need to. It's fine.
we're going to have you back. Best believe that. But real quick, before we wrap it up, just talk to me a little bit about coping skills. I know that dealing with depression has hit, and health issues and things like that. But just real briefly, talk a little bit about that and what have been some of your coping skills.
Coping skills, wow. I think for me, it's, I've been told that I give good advice, but I don't take advice very well. And I don't know that it's because I don't hear what people are saying or I don't appreciate the words they're giving me, but sometimes I think it's that in those moments, I lack the awareness that I need to be able to fully accept what they're giving me.
Gotcha. Yeah.
And that's hard to admit. Coping through the different things that I've experienced is just really been leaning on an understanding that we are all going through something at some time.
Yeah.
And overcoming those things doesn't always look like some big celebratory moment.
Right.
Sometimes overcoming those things is realizing that you haven't thought about it for a full 24 hours.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Or longer.
Right.
And just looking up and saying, wow, that doesn't bother me anymore.
That's good.
And being able to just leave it alone. Do I have hobbies or things like that? Not as much as I used to. I used to be very artistic and draw and things like that. Sometimes I'll read. Sometimes I will watch television for the escapism of it.
Yeah.
Music, as you know.
Oh, absolutely.
Music has always been my thing. Sometimes just getting in the car and putting the sunroof back and just driving
Yeah.
is enough for me to just clear my head
Yeah.
and get away. But really it's talking things through for me
Yeah.
with people that I care about, that I know that genuinely care about me.
Right.
and not being afraid to tell people when I'm having a hard time. I think one of the misconceptions of being a masculine individual is that you have to have the shell on and be strong and be resilient, and nothing should bother you, and you got to sit on your white horse and never fall.
Misconception.
That's the misconception.
Right.
And the unfortunate part is that not only is it a misconception that men have for themselves, it's a misconception that others have of men.
Absolutely.
So then it makes it difficult for them to ask for help when they've fallen off the horse, or to say, hey, I'm really not doing good.
Yeah.
I'm having a terrible day.
Yeah.
It's easy to ask, people ask, oh, how are you doing, this and the other? And, there's not always the right moment to say, man, I'm not doing good at all.
Yeah.
Because some people, they're not expecting that. Sometimes we just ask out of politeness to be cordial. How are you doing? What's going on? And you're like, oh yeah, I'm good, okay. And as long as that's the answer, we can kind of move on with our day.
Right.
But there's those moments sometimes where I think people have to make normal or normalize the moment that you ask someone if they're okay, and they say no.
Yeah. Right.
And they mean, I'm really not, and I appreciate you asking, and if you truly want to help delve into this with me, then I'm more than open to talk about it.
Yeah. And that's big.
That's
It takes a lot of courage.
It takes a lot to say that, and you can't say that with everybody.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
You gotta protect.
You gotta keep your safety on,
Right.
or you're gonna end up being triggered,
Right.
and then you're gonna be in a worse spot.
Absolutely.
But I think that when you have the opportunity with certain people to say those things, we tell each other how much we love each other so much, and how much we care about people's well-being.
Yeah.
But lack the opportunities to, or lack the effort to take the opportunities to truly be there for each other.
Yeah. Yeah.
And check up on that brother that is really kind of been distant,
Right.
or you haven't talked to for a minute, or is going through something, but I don't want to, make him feel like he's weak by asking these. No, man, he might need you.
That's right.
So you can flush some of that stuff out.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because part of being depressed and part of being in a space of doubt with yourself, you start to create these narratives in your mind that aren't necessarily true.
That's right.
That don't necessarily even fit the situation.
Yeah.
But they fit your feeling. They fit how you feel inside, and so you start piling all this stuff on yourself.
Ooh.
And
Yeah.
sometimes it takes another person, man or woman,
Yeah.
to say, dude, that's not real.
That's right.
Like, stop. You're taking this too far.
Too much.
This
You're
is
in your head.
You're in your head.
Too much.
I'm an overthinker.
Oh yeah.
And I'll create things in my mind that are so incredibly and so profoundly dark and unattainable or unrealistic that if I'm allowed to keep going with that,
Yeah.
it could be a very dark path. So I have to, in my own self-awareness, I've had to say, okay, this is getting really dark.
Yeah.
I got to say something to somebody.
Yes.
Because sometimes just saying, "Hey, I'm having a hard time," is enough for someone, at least the people that love you,
We're gonna talk through it.
right? To say, "Oh, whoa,
What you doing?
what's going on?"
Yeah.
And sometimes you need to be reminded that you are powerful, that you are intelligent, that you are capable, that you are all of the things that got you to a certain point, or that you're just all the things that the people around you that you've been serving,
Yeah.
all the people in your sphere that you've been that masculine man and been that man on the white horse for, those are the things that they see.
Yeah.
And because you're not seeing it, doesn't mean that they don't still see those things,
Right.
that they don't still see that about you. And sometimes it just takes having the conversation with those people to remind you, man, you're not doing as badly as you think.
That's right.
Or
That's right.
I've got inroads to helping you get to this point, because if I known, I could have helped you earlier, or, sometimes it's just speaking up. And like I said, as a manly man or being super masculine, it's difficult for men to do that, because somewhere along the line, we've been taught that if we get it done on our own, somehow that makes us more powerful.
Yeah. Well, I really appreciate you coming, Wellington.
No problem.
You know, we can talk forever.
Absolutely,
right?
absolutely.
And I appreciate you breaking down some of those stereotypes, because that's what this space is for.
Right.
And I really appreciate you.
Yeah, no problem.
So,
no problem at all.
With that being said, we're going to have to get out of here now. And y'all know who it is. It's Danielle N. Henry. Bye for now.